Well, hello again, basketball fans, and we are going to take a look at what the report card looks like for 2A basketball here, boys high school basketball. Now that we're at the midway point of the season, we can kind of assess the way things are going after the first half of the season and kind of look ahead as to what's going on for the remainder of the season. Most teams have played roughly 13 to 16 games right now in boys class 2A, so you starting to see things kind of take shape, and you kind of get a trend going, so to speak, to kind of figure out where teams may land and what might happen the rest of the season. Although I will be the first to tell you that the 2A basketball season is still wide open compared to the 1A. I think the 1A is, on the report we did earlier on that, I mean, there's fewer 1A teams to look at and fewer 1A dominant teams. So, it's easier to kind of trend and guess what's happening in 1A certainly than it is 2A. Obviously, there are rankings out there, both from the Associated Press as well as by Aaron Britton of Nesto Hoops, and we'll, for the purpose of this discussion, we'll use the report from Nesto Hoops. He does a lot of research, a lot of documentation around the country, around the state, to put his rankings together, and it's tough to argue with his logic on most of what he does, particularly with strength of schedule and that sort of thing. So we'll kind of go with that. But there are just so many really good 2A teams out there this year that, it's a wild card, and really literally anything can happen. But let's start at the top here, and let's look at the rankings that Nesto Hoops put out right after the holiday tournaments were played. And, of course, that was before the games were played this weekend. He had Peoria Manual ranked number 1 at 8-5. Some of you will say, well, how can a team with 5 losses be ranked number 1 in the state in Class 2A? Well, it's easy. You take a look at their strength of schedule and who they've played, and they play so many 3A and 4A schools. In fact, their losses were to Aurora West and Edwardsville and Peoria Richwoods. Now, Edwardsville, that's the only team to beat Collinsville this year. Collinsville just suffered their first loss in the state here over the weekend, and Edwardsville was the team that did it, so Edwardsville also beat Peoria Manual. In years past, Peoria Manual has been 3A, as has Belleville-Altoff, but unfortunately for everybody in 2A this year, you're going to have to put up with that. I mean, Peoria Manual and Belleville-Altoff are both here. They're in 2A, so you're going to have to deal with it as you run into them in postseason. So whether or not Manual will stay number 1 it remains to be seen. But number 2 and number 3 are certainly from this area, and they're two teams that we know very well and two teams that I've seen play multiple times, and that's the Bree Central Cougars at number 2 with a record of 16-2 now, and the Benton Rangers at number 3 with a record of 15-3. I've told a lot of people that I've seen out and about at ball games and things like that of all the Class 2A teams that I personally have seen play in person, those are the two best 2A teams that I have seen play. That doesn't mean they're the best two, but it's the two best that I have seen in person, and I've seen quite a few 2A teams. They're very consistent, and they have excellent programs and excellent personnel, and I like the fact that both of those programs step out and play teams that are schools that are bigger than they are. And, we see a lot of that going on in 1A now, where they're stepping up and playing 2A teams and sometimes 3A teams, and I think that's good to a degree. But when you see that in 2A, I especially like that too, when 2A teams will step out and play some 3A teams and sometimes even a 4A team. You just never know. But let's take a look at the Cougars of Bree Central. Again, they're 16-2, a big win over the weekend against 3A Highland, and that was on Highland's floor at the Highland Shootout, so that's a huge win. They also beat East Alton Wood River over the weekend. Now, the only 2 losses to Bree Central this year are to both Centralia and Olney, which are both 3A schools. So Bree Central still has not lost to anybody in 2A in the state of Illinois. They have games coming up here with Alton Marquette and Salem. They'll be participating in the Nashville Invitational Tournament, which, will be a good test for them, too. They'll play some good competition there. They were winners of the Breeze Mater Dei holiday tournament, so Bree Central has passed several tests, and they're a solid team at 16-2, and of course they were very good last year too, as everybody knows too. So until somebody in 2A can knock them out, they're a factor in this race in 2A boys basketball here in Southern Illinois and across the state. And right close behind them, again, the Benton Rangers. They are 15-3 now after losing a couple games out of state to some high-ranked Kentucky schools over the weekend. But, again, I applaud Benton for going down to Kentucky and playing the better competition like that. It's teams that they probably didn't know a whole lot about, might have seen a little bit of film on them beforehand. But It's very good competition. They're high-ranked teams in Kentucky. Like I said, they went down there and played 3 teams, I think, lost to 2 of them, but beat 1. And, they're 15-3 on the season. And, their only loss in the state of Illinois was to a 3A school. They lost to the Olney Tigers in the last seconds of that game at the semifinals of the Pinckneyville Invitational Tournament. So, again, Olney's a 3A school. And coming up, Benton will be playing at Pinckneyville this week, which will be a great test for both the Rangers and the Panthers. That will be a good measuring stick for both of them. And then, of course, they may very well meet again here the week after next at the BIT, the Benton Invitational Tournament, as Pinckneyville is also in that tournament at Benton, along with teams like Carterville and Heron, which Benton might see there as well. The other thing you got to remember about the Rangers is they gave Goreville their only loss this year. Goreville, as we said, is a real powerhouse in 1A again this year, and the only loss that Goreville has is to Benton. So the Rangers have passed a lot of tests. They've got a lot of weapons. Again, you've got Dr. Tedeschi, who can do it all, both inside and outside. But they've got some sharpshooters too, with Melvin and Munoz and Owens and Billington. So it's a good basketball team for sure, as is Bree Central. So I like both those teams, and they, like I said, in my opinion, they're the best 2A teams that I have seen. Now that's not to knock anybody else, because there's some other really good ones out there, and there's a few that I haven't seen yet. But those are the 2 best 2A teams that I've seen. In Nesto Hoops rankings of other teams kind of in our area, Belleville-Altoff was ranked 12th in his last poll right after the holiday tournaments, and Altoff is, I think, 11-7 now, I believe. And again, you might say, well, gosh, they've lost a lot of games. How can they be ranked that high in 2A? Well, again, you got to look at the competition they play. They have some key wins against Belleville East. They've beaten O'Fallon. They've beaten Mater Dei. They've beaten Lincoln. And among the teams that they've lost to, a lot of the teams they've lost to are 3A or 4A schools. As they've lost to Mount Zion, they've lost to Quincy, they've lost to Alton, and they've lost to Decatur MacArthur. So Belleville-Altoff will be a factor, and because they play that tough competition, that makes them tougher to score off with if you end up meeting them in postseason, because they're going to be well-conditioned, having played a rugged schedule like that. Number 15 on Nesto Hoops rankings in Class 2A were the Lawrenceville Indians. Indians come in at 12-2, and I'll just be quite honest with you. I don't think Lawrenceville's played anybody yet. I'll just be very blunt about it. They lost to Olney, and they lost to Trenton Westland. Okay, that's their 2 losses. They have upcoming games against North Clay and Robinson and Newton, and those are going to be better tests for them. So we'll see, especially the Newton game. We'll see how Lawrenceville does with that. But, I honestly would like to see the Indians play a little bit tougher schedule than what they've played so far, because they don't really have any signature wins yet. Yes, they're 12-2, but they don't really have any signature wins that you can hang your hat on. Had they beaten Trenton Westland, well, yeah, then you'd have a signature win, but they didn't. So they are 12-2. So 16th on the Nesto Hoops rankings in Class 2A for boys is the Teutopolis Wooden Shoes. They are now 11-5, and they have lost games to, again, bigger schools. They lost to Mount Vernon. They lost to Olney. I believe they lost to Highland. But they've got some good wins against some teams like Columbia and Monticello. And coming up, they've got some big tests coming up, as they're going to play Tuscola. They're going to play Mount Zion, St. Joe Ogden, and they're going to be playing Centralia, too, down at the Pinckneyville Shootout on the 27th. That'll be a game we'll be covering down there, by the way. Here on AreaSports.net, one of the 2 games that we'll do that day. So that'll be a good test for the Wooden Shoes when they play those teams upcoming in their schedule. But T-Town plays a very good schedule. So, again, 11-5. I wouldn't worry about that record. They're going to be well-conditioned by the time the end of the season gets here, and they're going to be ready for postseason play, as they usually are. 17th on the Nesto Hoops rankings. They came out right after the holiday tournaments, Pinckneyville Panthers. Of course, they were the champions of no, they didn't win the tournament. They lost to Olney in the championship game. So that's a 3A team they lost to. They're 14-4 on the season. They lost to Nashville over the weekend, that big rivalry game. But then they turned right around the next night and beat St. Joe Ogden. So you got to give the Panthers credit for bouncing back that next night on Saturday and beating St. Joe Ogden on the road at their place after losing at Nashville. Their other losses include losses to Mount Vernon, Olney, and Mater Dei. So, again, Pinckneyville has lost to some quality teams. And, again, they're going to be tested here real soon, as they have a date with Benton this coming week. and then may very well face the Rangers again in the BIT tournament, where Vandalia will be their first-round opponent. But, the Panthers, new coach this year, new system put in, I'm sure, doing a few things differently than it did in the past. But I think they're getting better all the time, and, they're going to be there in the end when it comes tournament time. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with. Some other teams that aren't in the rankings, but we got to pay attention to and talk about. Trenton Westland, okay, they're 11-2. A lot of people, upset they're not in the rankings, and I get that because you can make an argument that they could be. They do have wins against Lawrenceville and Mater Dei. They beat Columbia, Waterloo. They've definitely got some quality wins. Their two losses, though, they lost to Sparta and lost to Carlisle here just recently. But they're going to have a chance to avenge that Sparta loss here real soon in a game upcoming. So we'll keep our eye on Trenton Westland and see how they do. But, again, another good basketball team that even though they're not ranked, they're dangerous and definitely could be a factor in postseason. The Vienna Eagles the same way. Vienna is 13-5 on the season. They've lost twice to Massac County. But they, have still some wins to talk about, and they'll have some games coming up on their schedule, particularly I think Anna Jonesboro and Meridian are on their schedule here soon, and so they'll have a chance to show what they can do as too. So you got to be careful about the Vienna Eagles down in this part of southern Illinois. Carmide Bulldogs might be a little bit of a sleeper this year too. They're 11-3, but they've lost twice to the Heron Tigers in those three losses, and then also lost to Benton. So there you go. They've lost to some pretty good teams. Carmide doesn't play as tough a schedule as some of the other people do, but you still got to give them credit for the games that they've won because the people that have been put in front of them they've taken care of, except for Heron and Benton. Massac County is another good basketball team that's 12-5. They've split games with Heron this year. They won one and lost one. They've beaten Vienna twice, so those are quality wins. They beat Carterville. And coming up, Massac County has games against Murfreesboro and Carbondale, so that'll tell us a lot about the Patriots and the direction they're going. Some other teams I'd certainly keep an eye on, and they're on our Teams to Watch page on our website at AreaSports.net in Class 2A. Columbia's a good team. Newton's a good team. I've seen them play. Alton Marquette, Shelbyville, Redbud, Carlisle. And then as of late, even though they got off to slow starts, Breeze Mater Dei has been really bouncing back here as of late, and so have the Nashville Hornets. So, those are always two good storied programs that find a way to get there in the end. And even though they may have started slow this year, they're knocking people off now, and so they're going to be somebody to reckon with when it comes postseason. So, again, 2A is just way more wide open than what 1A is. And I think that's usually the case every year just because you have so many good programs in this part of southern Illinois. So let's look at postseason now and how it may shake out in 2A. All right. First of all, you have two sectionals that are going to feed into the Carbondale Super Sectional at SIU Arena. You'll have the Benton Sectional and you'll have the Shelbyville Sectional. So in the Benton Sectional, you have subsection Group A, which will feature regionals at Breeze Central and at Columbia. And in those regionals at Breeze Central and Columbia, not only do you have those two teams, but you've got Pinckneyville, you got Mater Dei, Trenton Westland, Nashville, Redbud, Belleville, Altoff, and Carlisle. So obviously subsection A is loaded. Whoever comes out of there in those two regionals is definitely going to earn it, and then they'll find their place at the Benton Sectional. On the other part of that, in subsectional B, which will feed into the Benton Sectional, subsection B will include regionals at Massac County and at West Frankfort. And the teams involved in those regionals will include not only Massac County and West Frankfort, but also Benton, Carmi, Anna Jonesboro, Carterville, Harrisburg, Murfreesboro, Vienna, and a few others. So pretty good competition there too. So again, trying to punch your ticket to the Benton Sectional this year will, be a tough job in those regionals on that side of the bracket. Then on the other side, in the Shelbyville Sectional, which will, again, also feed in down there to the SIU Arena, Shelbyville Sectional and Subsection A, you will have regionals at Newton and at Vandalia. And some of the teams involved in those regionals, besides those two, will include Lawrenceville, Fairfield, Teotopolis, Flora, and Marshall. Maybe not quite as competitive as some of the other ones that we already talked about, but still some good teams there. And then in subsection B, of that Shelbyville sectional, you will have regionals at St. Joe Ogden and at Monticello. And some of the teams involved there will also include Shelbyville, Tolono Unity, Sullivan, and Warrensburg Latham. So that's kind of how it all lays out and what it looks like. And again, we won't know the actual seeds until February 8th when they're released by the IHSA, and we won't know the actual brackets until the next day on February 9th when the IHSA releases it. But at least we still kind of know where the regionals are at. We know the groupings of teams that will be involved in those different regionals. We just don't know the exact seeds or brackets yet, but you can kind of start formalizing and thinking about, okay, this team may go here, this team may go there, that sort of thing. But there's still a lot of basketball left to be played. I know coaches don't like to look ahead, or at least they tell you that, but believe me, they are. Coaches have looked at this. They know. And some of these games that we talked about already in this report are going to kind of size up where teams are at and going to tell us a lot of how the rest of the season shapes up as we move forward here in the second half of this basketball season. But it's been fun up to date, and I haven't seen a lot of good basketball out there. I know you have too. It's been enjoyable. We got some talent out there in 2A this year, and it's going to be fun to see who represents Southern Illinois and what happens when it all gets to Champaign. So that's going to wrap up our boys Class 2A report here